Thanks for joining us for CBN News. I'm Heather Sells.
And I'm Ephraim Graham. President Obama has made good on his promise to take executive action on immigration. Reaction is mixed, with many immigrants cheering the announcement, while critics say Obama is acting like an emperor. As White House correspondent Jennifer Wishon explains, the matter will likely end up in court.
With the stroke of his pen today, President Obama will spare nearly 5 million illegal immigrants from getting deported.
Scripture tells us that we shall not oppress a stranger, for we know the heart of a stranger. We were strangers once too.
The main winners are immigrants who've been here illegally more than 5 years, whose children are citizens or legal residents. After passing a criminal background check, paying taxes, and registering, they can stay in the U.S. temporarily and work lawfully. The president's actions will also make it easier for high-skilled immigrants to work in the U.S. He also promises to keep deporting criminals, focusing law enforcement on what he calls actual threats to American security.
Felons, not families. Criminals, not children. Gang members, not a mom who's working hard to provide for her kids.
Although millions of illegal immigrants benefit from the president's actions, some 6 million are left out. Many Hispanic evangelical pastors say they see the destructive effects deportations have on families by breaking them up. Reverend Tony Suarez with the National Hispanic Leadership Conference tells CBN News he wants families to be able to stay together.
Children have been losing their parents, spouses have been losing their husband or their wife. This is about family reunification. This is about bringing families that love the Lord, that believe in the value of life and marriage, to keep them together in this country that they really genuinely love.
For Suarez, the president is providing leadership in an area where Congress has failed. However, Speaker John Boehner says the president, by acting unilaterally and going around Congress, has ignored the will of the people. Boehner says that the president said it would lead to a surge in more illegal immigration. He said he was not a king and not the emperor, and that he was bound by the Constitution. He said an action like this would exceed his authority and be difficult to justify legally. He may have changed his position, Boehner says, but that doesn't change the Constitution. Responding to warnings by Republicans, President Obama says his actions don't amount to amnesty.
Amnesty is the immigration system we have today. Millions of people who live here without paying their taxes or playing by the rules, while politicians use the issue to scare people and whip up votes at election time.
Still, some call his actions unconstitutional. The Attorney General of Texas has already promised to challenge the president in court, and Republicans in Congress are certain to look for ways to challenge the president's actions as well. Jennifer Wishon, CBN News, the White House.
The Obama administration is admitting that it made miscalculations about the Affordable Care Act. White House officials originally said there were 7.3 million people signed up for insurance plans. In reality, only 6.9 million were enrolled. That's according to investigators with the White House Oversight Committee. With the House Oversight Committee. They say the misstep came from adding about 400,000 dental subscribers to the original number.
Obamacare architect Jonathan Gruber recently made headlines for admitting a, quote, lack of transparency helped to get the bill through Congress. And transparency has been a big problem when it comes to abortion funding in Obamacare. But pro-life leaders announced Thursday they're launching a new website to expose which health care plans cover abortion on demand. More than 1,000 of those plans use taxpayer subsidies to help to pay for abortions. Until now, it's been hard for consumers to discover anywhere if they're joining a plan they might disagree with.
Everyone, and I mean everyone, in all 50 states is being forced to subsidize elective abortions with taxpayer funds.
Despite an appalling degree of non-transparency and obfuscation by the administration, an extensive audit by the General Accountability Office found in September that 1,036 Obamacare exchange plans covered elective abortion. This website will inform, it'll motivate people to choose the right plans, and I want to congratulate the Lozier Institute as well as the Family Research Council for for having the wisdom to create it.
Now, the address for that new website is obamacareabortion.com. You can find a link for it at cbnnews.com.
In Washington state, 2 pharmacists and a pharmacy owner are fighting for the right to decline to sell emergency contraceptives. They first sued the state in 2007 after the Washington Pharmacy Board ruled they could not refuse to sell Plan B because of religious beliefs. Now their case is before the 9th U.S. Circuit Court of Appeals. On Thursday, they argue that the state ruling violated their constitutional religious rights. Pro-choice protesters have picketed the pharmacy, hoping to shut it down. The pharmacists say that customers can get the morning after pill at 30 pharmacies within a 5-mile radius of their business.
Deadly wintry weather continues to pound northern parts of the U.S. At least 12 people have died in Buffalo, New York, mainly from heart attacks and exposure. Snow has piled up to around 8 feet in some areas. Our Mark Martin has the story.
Brutal weather like the kind you can see in the middle of winter keeps hitting parts of the U.S., from lightning and thunder snow to feet of snow continuing to pile up in areas like Michigan all the way to western New York. Some people cannot get into their homes.
My wife's got cerebral palsy. I'm trying to get into the house. I said to at least get to her.
Others must get out. The heavy snow causing ceilings to collapse. Buildings are beginning to stagger under the weight. Homeowners shovel their roofs in addition to their driveways.
I got to get up there and shovel, otherwise this roof's going to come down.
Residents of a nursing home had to be evacuated after the roof, pummeled by snow, is in danger of caving in. A nearby warehouse already collapsed. Then there are rescues by snow machine. A person is carried to safety in a stretcher. The governor of New York is begging people to stay off the roads. In the meantime, Sunday's game will not be played at the stadium of the Buffalo Bills. Instead, it will be played in Detroit. Forecasters say temperatures are expected to warm up considerably this weekend. However, that means flooding is possible. Mark Martin, CBN News.
Residents in Ferguson, Missouri are bracing for backlash. They're still waiting for a grand jury decision on whether Officer Darren Wilson should stand trial in the shooting death of Michael Brown. As John Jessup reports, many want to move beyond the violence, protests, and hatred.
Not to fight, only to hate. Oh, only to there?
Love for the city of Ferguson is written across Susan Ankenbrand's face and spelled out for all to see.
There's so much heart in this community that's hard to portray. I wish everyone could talk to some of the residents here, both black and white, because this is really a special place.
But that's not the picture most people have after this summer's protests and riots following the death of Michael Brown, a black teen shot and killed by a white police officer. Former Mayor Brian Fletcher started the I Love Ferguson campaign in part to change the city's public perception. But it's not just the city's reputation that's taken a hit. The local economy has too. Fletcher's campaign is also helping area businesses beaten and broken down during the riots. So far, his group has donated thousands of dollars to help them rebuild.
And this is Ferguson proud.
While some are gone for good, others still show the scars, open for business but boarded up with plywood. Fletcher blames those he calls professional protesters for stirring up trouble.
Very few Ferguson residents have been arrested as a result of the unrest. Not that we don't have any residents that are protesting, we do, but they're being the peaceful protesters. They're not causing the problems.
Rick Canamore is one of the peaceful. He's protested across the street from the police department since August and says justice doesn't demand violence.
I think that we can do the civil disobedience, and we can protest, and we make our voices be heard without, tearing down the city.
As someone who's familiar with the city's history, Fletcher acknowledges the problems and disparities between whites and blacks, but he says others are projecting national problems onto one St. Louis suburb of 20,000.
They're using this as an example of what injustice has been done to African Americans throughout history. And I certainly can understand and agree with some of those, but the back of Ferguson I don't think is large enough to handle all the problems of the nation.
While everyone has been watching Ferguson, the focus has shifted to here at the county courthouse in Clayton, Missouri, where a grand jury will decide whether to indict Officer Darren Wilson on possible charges of murder or find no probable cause if jurors believe he acted out of self-defense or feared for his life. John Jessup, CBN News, St. Louis County, Missouri.
Israel has been dealing with a string of lone wolf terror attacks this year. This week's cold-blooded attack at a Jerusalem synagogue raised the alarm. Israelis are now at risk anywhere in their nation. CBN spoke with Israeli Ambassador Ron Dermer about the attacks. He explains why the counterattack will likely be harsh.
You'll see a very tough response, because you can imagine what the response would be if people came into a church in Washington, in your capital, and started hacking people with meat cleavers and shooting them. Obviously, your president would take a very strong response. So we'll have to wait and see what that is, but he's going to have to do what he has to do in order to defend the Israeli public.
11 people have died at the hands of Palestinian attackers in recent weeks.
Coming up, a man waves the flag of ISIS on a college campus to see how students would respond, and he records what happens. Stick around, we'll show you this must-see video. Prayers at county commissioner meetings in Forsyth, North Carolina are back on the agenda. On Thursday, a federal judge removed an order that banned commissioners from delivering prayers that refer to Jesus Christ or other deities. The American Civil Liberties Union had argued the prayer policy was discriminatory, but Forsyth County says the policy is inclusive of all faiths.
A high school student is suing a Washington state school district for violating his right to free speech. Michael Leal says Cascade High School administrators suspended him 3 times for preaching and handing out Christian booklets. He's now filed a federal lawsuit in Seattle with the help of the Pacific Justice Institute. Its attorneys have said, quote, "We are eager to vindicate Mr. Leal's rights and prevent him from being expelled for simply sharing his deeply held beliefs." School officials say he was suspended for being disruptive and not for the content of his message.
A California man did an experiment to see how students at UC Berkeley would react to the ISIS flag being flown on campus, and the reaction might surprise you.
ISIS is misunderstood. We just want our own state. Why does America keep bombing us? America and Western imperialism are to blame, not ISIS. We just want a state of our own, an Islamic state, no different than America. We do not want to hurt anybody else if we don't have to hurt them. Why is America killing us? They're killing innocent civilians. America is causing the death in Iraq and in Syria. America is to blame for the deaths in Syria, not ISIS.
As you can see here, students are not saying much about the flag or what the man is saying. Some students even give him nods of approval.
We are ISIS. We are love. We don't want to harm anybody. We're forced to by American imperialism and American laws. Right?
But wait until the man lights up a cigarette.
You can't smoke on campus. They're going to cite you.
Oh, all right. Thanks, man. Appreciate it.
Now see what happens when the same man brings an Israeli flag on campus.
Israel's what? I don't even know what that means, sir. And what's Hamas is a great place, right? Excuse me? That's the way you respond? I can't hear what you're saying.
All of Israel killer.
All of Israel killers? And Hamas are not killers?
No.
Tyranny isn't cute. What? Isn't cute? Right, tyranny's not cute. Hamas is not cute.
That flag you wave is the psychological genocide of this planet.
That video was created by filmmaker Ami Horowitz as part of his web series Ami on the Street.
Up next, a Christian hauled into an Islamic court in Qatar, the bizarre case that has these Americans facing the death penalty.
An American Christian couple in Qatar is facing a death sentence after their 8-year-old adopted daughter died.
The government of Qatar alleges that Matt and Grace Wang starved their daughter Gloria to death in order to traffic her organs. The government then charged them with murder and sentenced to 3 years in prison.
The U.S. government has tried to intervene, but the Wangs remain under house arrest and are not allowed to leave the country. They are set to appear in Islamic Qatari court on November 30th.
Charlene Aaron spoke with Grace and Matthew from Doha, Qatar.
Matthew, first of all, tell us what led your family to Qatar.
My company, MWH, transferred me for a job.
in Qatar. I'm an engineer, and we're working on a World Cup-related infrastructure project.
And you guys adopted 3 children from Africa, but you say that Qatar doesn't really understand adoption.
It's not something that they do here. It's not in the language. It's something that's very confusing to them.
Tell us about Gloria's death. What happened?
I found Gloria on the floor in her room. She was breathing weakly, and I brought her to the hospital, to the emergency room. They did CPR on her for about 40 minutes, and she was pronounced dead.
And she had had some medical issues when you adopted her initially, right?
She was neglected, abused as a child, and so yeah, when she came to us, that was what she brought, and it's quite common for children adopted out of who have experienced hunger and malnourishment to have difficulties.
Why do you think that the Qatari government immediately suspected you murdered her? Is it because of your Christian faith?
I think initially it was racial. They looked at us, who are Chinese Americans, and they looked at our children, who are Africans, and because we have different ethnicities, and they thought that we must have done something wrong because they wouldn't understand. They don't understand how we, as Chinese Americans, could have black kids.
Now, you've actually been accused of adopting your children for the sake of trafficking them for organs. How do you even begin to respond to that?
We found that they wrote in, the investigators wrote in the court documents that adopted kids need to be good looking and look like their parents. And they actually wrote in the documents that our children were ugly.
After Gloria's death, you were jailed for a year. What was that experience like?
Even begin to describe what it's like to suddenly be separated from everything and everybody that, the day after Gloria passed away, I was separated not only from my husband, but also from the children. And I did not see them again until they were released from the orphanage 4 months later. So yeah, it's just, you suddenly are completely isolated from the world.
I think the hardest thing was being away from Grace. I was not permitted to see her. I was not permitted to talk to her. And going through a traumatic event like our daughter's death and not being able to talk to my wife was the most difficult part.
Now, your other 2 children are back here in the U.S. with family. How are they doing?
Thankfully, they're safe, and we miss them tremendously.
You are Christians, and your church here in the U.S. has been praying for your release. How has your faith helped you?
I think from the moment that I entered the prison, it was just the sense that God is present and He is with me no matter where I am. And not only is He with me, but He was with Matt and He was with our children. And that even though we're separated, God is present and taking care of them. And that means a lot.
Well, we are certainly trusting and praying with you for God's best. Matthew and Grace Wong, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you.
It's the weekend, and you may be looking for a little family-friendly entertainment. Here with our regular movie review is Bob Waliszewski from Plugged In Online. That's the entertainment review department from Focus on the Family. Well, Bob, we've got the 3rd installment of The Hunger Games coming out. It's called Mockingjay. Sure to be a blockbuster, but how does it rank for family friendliness?
Yeah, and I might add Mockingjay Part 1. There's been 3 books. There will be 4 movies. They're splitting that last book up into 2 films. You don't think Ephraim, that finances would have anything to do with that, do you? This is, like you said, this has been a blockbuster. It will do huge this weekend. I'm going to start right up front by saying a surprise for many of our viewers. We gave this one a 3.5 out of 5 for family friendliness with teens in mind. We're beyond the games now, and Katniss, the main heroine in this film, is a reluctant rallying cry trying to get the people that have been oppressed in this futuristic society to rally together to stand up against the oppression in the Capitol. And as such, this is a film that sends a message, a cautionary tale message, about the abuse of governmental power. And quite frankly, when you looked at it that way, we felt we had to. There was no language here. There was no sensuality here. And even the violence, which is here, was relatively minor.
Well, many people, of course, have criticized this series for being dark because it is essentially about teens killing teens. What would you say to those who argue that 3.5 stars might be a little too much?
I totally get that. And we gave the first film a 3.5, gave the second one a 3, and here we're at a 3.5. Here's how I would answer it. What we deal with at Plugged In is go see the film, report on it from a family perspective. And so we get this idea of the realness of this futuristic society. Then you have to say, how is the violence being handled? And what we see is the main characters are very reluctant to kill. Is this glamorized? Absolutely not. Do they absolutely hate the fact that they're in these games having to kill one another? They do. So the message came across as very anti-violence, not pro-violence. Yes, there's violence, but it's really a cautionary tale about the violence. So as such, now we're thinking older, teens on up, not younger kids, but we felt fair to give it that 3.5.
All right, that'll do it for us this week, Bob. Thank you.
You bet, Ephraim.
And that's it for now on CBN News Today. You can find more of our exclusive coverage of the issues that you care most about at cbnnews.com.
Hope you join us again right here next time. Have a fabulous Friday and a wonderful weekend.